Parents sometimes tell me that they think that their child, their gifted child, is smarter than they are. And that I'm going to discuss some reasons why that might not necessarily be true. For one thing, parents sometimes see their children demonstrating skills that are far above what they did at the same age. In other words, they may see that their 3-year-old is doing things that they were not capable of doing at age 3-year-old, like at age 3, like reading, for example. They may also see their children today picking up new skills faster than what they can do right now themselves. Like if the parents get a new TV, their child figures out the remote much quicker than they are, or software on the computer much more quickly than they do, while the parent has to study and sit down and practice it. And the third thing is that sometimes children will present very good arguments against parental rules or decisions. They can basically out-argue their parents, which sometimes can make the parents feel like their child is, again, smarter than they are. Heredity and environment. In reality, bright children usually don't come out of nowhere. Bright children usually come from bright parents. IQ is believed to be about 80 to 85% inherited. So if it is your biological child, chances are you provided the biological material that some people believe is behind IQ or learning aptitude, the nature part of the nature-nurture argument. Parents also provide much of their child's early learning experiences, exposure to vocabulary. They may talk to their child in a way that challenges their brain or encourages inquisitive thought, encourages a certain way of looking at and learning from the world. So that's the nurture part of the argument. I'm sorry, that's a typo. It should be nurture. So chances are bright children usually don't come out of nowhere. They usually come from bright families. Also, children today have very different educational experiences. They have more access to and more exposure to ideas and skills than previous generations did. When my generation went to school, if we even went to preschool at all, those preschool classes usually dealt with playing or teaching social skills like, for example, sharing. We weren't expected to read at age 3 and we weren't taught to do so. Very different expectations and very different early educational experiences really change what children accomplish at different ages. Excuse me. Also, children today have access to educational software and games that offer stimulating, on-demand learning opportunities that weren't available to us either. My video on the right age to test has a lot more information about this. But basically, they have constant exposure to a lot more information, a lot more rapid information, and they can learn independently without having to have an adult sit with them and constantly interact with them and teach them things. So they're getting tremendous more exposure to both information and skills. Children today know more because their educations begin much earlier and are much more intensive and much more constant. And that can also explain one of the reasons why your 3-year-old knows more skills than you did at age 3. Excuse me. Incidental learning, another reason why young children today seem to know more than you do today, why your young child seems to do better than you do, is that young children often seem smarter to older generations because they pick up new skills and knowledge very quickly and with seemingly little effort. This has always been the case. Older generations are frequently impressed by younger generations. Chances are your parents were impressed by how quickly you figured out the new remote or the new software program, that you figured it out long before they did. Whereas they actually had to sit there and study it, you figured it out in minutes. This is due to something called incidental learning. Incidental learning basically refers to the fact that young children absorb facts very quickly at a high rate, and they acquire skills very quickly, especially before age 8. Very young children are like sponges. They learn massive amounts of information almost by accident without studying or practicing it, even when it seems they may not even have been listening. For example, it's commonly believed that we learn more vocabulary before age 3 than many of us learn in the entire rest of our lives combined. This talent starts to fade after age 8. As you get older, more effort has to be put into learning, and by the time you hit your teens, or certainly adulthood, usually you have to sit and study and practice in order to learn new skills, even if you are an intelligent person. It still takes more effort to learn new skills and to cement them into your memory. There are a number of reasons or a number of theories about why this is true. There's no real proof about why it's true, but one of the main theories is that young children come into the world with a very pliable brain. Their neural networks are still very open to change, still very what we call plastic, so that the child's brain can adapt to suit whatever cultural or linguistic circumstances the child may grow up in. By age 8 or so, you've been in the same culture, presumably for 8 years, and your brain kind of realizes what skills are likely to be most useful for that child in their life and what skills may not really be needed by that child. This is especially true in the past when children may have grown up in vastly different circumstances. They may have grown up in a mostly illiterate farming community, for example, which required a certain set of skills, or in a very literate urban environment where different skills were needed. And the brain kind of helps to hone in on which skills are necessary and which skills aren't. After age 8, it starts to kind of narrow down the information that it regards as being the most important. In youth, the brain tries to learn as much information about as many different things as possible, and then as it gets older, the focus narrows and narrows. That's why the best time to learn a second language is usually before age 8, and why adults have trouble distinguishing language sounds that are not part of their native tongue. Like, for example, some languages have clicking sounds or have certain phonetic elements that are not present in other languages. If you're born into that language, you have no trouble distinguishing those sounds or producing them. If you try to learn that language as an adult, on the other hand, you may have trouble hearing them when other people speak, and you may have trouble producing those sounds yourself. Again, the brain tries to adapt itself to whatever circumstances it thinks the child is going to grow up in, and to the skills it thinks that child will need in its life. That's the theory, at any rate, as to why incidental learning occurs. Little lawyers. Finely gifted children, especially those with advanced verbal or logical reasoning abilities, can sometimes out-argue their parents with very convincing points sometimes that can sometimes leave their parents unsure about their decisions or wavering a little bit. In terms of even if they seem smarter than you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are, or just because they can out-argue you doesn't necessarily mean that they're smarter than you are, quote unquote smarter than you are. Remember that the children are highly motivated to get their way. Children are almost always better rested than the adults they deal with, whether it be parents or teachers, and children are blessed with an unending energy. Again, just because they can out-argue you doesn't necessarily mean that they're smarter than you are. Anytime we discuss discipline or parent-child relationships or adult-child relationships, there's always value judgments. So you may very well disagree with some of the things I say here. But in my opinion, just remind yourself of the reasons you made the rules in the first place. If you had a good reason for your rules, you don't need to justify them to your child. It's good to let children know why rules are formed, what purpose they serve. But as long as you made them with good faith, with your child's best interest at heart, you really don't have to prove to your child that your rules are worthwhile. You have more life experience, more demands on your time, and more responsibility on your shoulders. And the rules you make probably reflect that. Even if the child isn't happy with the rules, they may, in fact, be the best rules for not only for the child themselves, but for your entire family or for the entire class. Another value in judgment, but in my experience, if you do let a child argue with you a lot, some children will then debate every single thing they dislike. And that can create a tense environment, whether it be in a family or in a classroom. My personal opinion, or one way to approach it, is to insist on compliance at the moment, that the rule needs to be exercised, but later, like at Sunday dinner or something, you can go behind the logic behind your rules. And as long as they're respectful, you can listen to their calmly presented reasons why they disagree with you. And it just depends on your view of the parent-child relationship, if you feel the child should have any say in household rules or not. And again, it is a matter of opinion or values, but I do believe that there is a danger in believing that a child is smarter than you, whether it's your own child or a child you work with in a classroom. When adults are overly impressed by or even intimidated by their children's intelligence, they may allow that child to assume an adult-like role or an equal role in the household. And children don't always have the experience or judgment to really carry that out. An extreme example maybe, for instance, I've heard there have been parents in the news who've let their very young children fly a plane by themselves or handle a gun. Or cases, that I've heard of where children infringe on the parents' rights, like the children may open the parents' email or something. No matter how smart the child is or how good of an argument they can come up with, it is important to remember that they are a child. And finally, this is not so much opinion. There is, in fact, extensive research, that supports the benefits of firm but loving parental structure. Even gifted children benefit from predictable rules, and they feel more secure knowing they're in the hands of a self-assured adult who's more experienced and more competent than they are. So even if you really do think your child is smarter than you, it is not always good to let them believe that, or to tell them that you think that they're smarter than you are. Safety in young children, the feeling of safety comes from the feeling of being in the hands of knowing that they're being taken care of by somebody who's competent. Even if you don't always feel that way, the old saying, you fake it till you make it. You need to give the impression that they're in the hands of somebody who can take care of them. So even if they come up, even if you don't necessarily believe that you are smarter than your child, don't be too quick to shortchange yourself. You have a lot of life experience that they don't have. And those experiences are just as important when it comes to making rules and making decisions as whatever their IQ or whatever their ability to problem solve or reason might be. Thank you. Oh, and thank you.